Yeah, wonderful. So excited. We just had a great, fantastic talk from Bo, who gave, I think, a fantastic overview about the space. And now we have the chance to dive a little bit deeper in this topic of AI safety and security. And yeah, so please feel free in the audience to ask questions. We have some questions, but we can make it interactive and adapt depending on your questions. But before we get started, I think maybe let's take a minute each so that you have a chance to introduce yourself in the panel, and maybe we go with the order: Nada, Nathan, Yui, and Eddie. So maybe you can briefly talk about who you are and what you're currently working on so that everyone knows you.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. Hi, everyone. I'm Nada Madkour. I'm the interim director of the AI Security Initiative at the UC Berkeley Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity. I specialize in AI risk management and AI disclosure/transparency. I've represented our team in several AI governance bodies, including the NIST AI Consortium, ISO AI Standards Working Groups, and the EU AI Act Code of Practice Working Groups. Very excited to be here with such a great group of speakers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nathan Hodges. I'm a data scientist at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. My current work is sort of leading our internal research portfolio on generative AI, as well as helping out with AI safety on the emerging Genesis mission in DOE. My application space that I usually worry about is the application to science and national security issues.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. So it's a great honor to be here. I'm Yue Dong, assistant professor at UC Riverside in the computer science department. I mostly work on natural language processing, and so recently more on trustworthy AI, in particularly adversarial robustness of large language models. So we're looking at, for example, adversarial attack and backdoor and privacy type of attack to stress test the language models. And in particularly, I'm more interested in mechanistic interpretability. So how we come up with better defenses inside of the model to be able to guardrail a diverse kind of like a range of different attacks.
Morning, everybody. My name is Eddie French. I'm a CS PhD student at Dakota State University. I have experience working at the Department of Defense and just last summer at AI Sweden, working on some AI security things. Maybe we'll get into some of those definitions later. The bulk of my research ends up in, as I said, AI security, and that typically falls within the land of LLMs and kind of the interactions between humans and LLMs and the way that they receive and use information.
Wonderful. Eddie, you good pointer. Maybe we start there. I thought it would be nice to use a minute to talk a bit about the definitions, because what do we mean by AI safety security? So personally, I'm not a cybersecurity expert. I work in there. I call everything AI safety, but technically that's not correct. So maybe you want to start, Eddie, and give us a bit your perspective. And I know these terms are different in different fields, different domains, how they're used. But a bit for you, what's the difference between AI safety and AI security, or security more generally?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, yeah, as you said, it's not exactly I wouldn't say that there's a dictionary textbook definition that everyone adheres to. My understanding of it is that AI safety is probably the broader category. I would expect that most people would consider AI security a subset of AI safety topics. AI safety, I would imagine, often would cover things like alignment of AI systems, how we ensure that AI is not, I suppose, going to kill us all, and then AI security, I would imagine, would fall into things like ensuring against adversarial prompting, adversarial training examples, making sure that your AI systems are secure in a more like cybersecurity context against attackers.
Okay, great. Does anyone wants to add to it? Maybe Nada, what is your perspective on those terms?
Yeah, I definitely agree that AI safety is the broader term. I think for something to be safe, it needs to be secure. The way that I see it, security is more related to protecting the AI system from external threats, making sure that the vulnerabilities that can be exploited are patched up. AI safety is, more broader, more systemic, making sure that the AI systems behave as intended and the outputs don't cause harm. In practice, the two do overlap in a lot of ways, and I see that the terms they're being used interchangeably. I do appreciate the framing, though, of, would you get on a plane that is secure but not safe? And I think that sometimes puts it in perspective for me.
That's very nice. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Nathan, do you want to add to it, or
Yeah, so
otherwise?
I feel the same. It just like, to me, AI safety, there was a paper about it. I think there was
Yeah.
a lot of like community discussion about it, right? So I just kind of like want to summarize what paper said, but it was kind of essentially agree with Eddie and Nada's point. AI safety seems to be more concerned about unintended harmful behaviors. So there's a lot of like model's own issues, like for example, hallucination without being purposely manipulated falls under AI safety to me. So it's actually harder to solve like for AI safety. And AI security on the other side was more, to me, more about concerns on like intentional manipulation. So that's like kind of like all these adversarial attacks, or we purposely try to trigger models to misbehave. That's to me more on AI security. So a lot of times I think we're more concerned about many times we don't know what AI could make wrong or when they will be wrong. That's to me more like a broader AI safety problem there.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay, great. So I guess, I asked Bo at the end of her talk if AI is any safer in 2026 than it maybe was 10 years ago. And I guess her answer was no, it's not. The attack surface is increasing steadily. And I guess the vulnerabilities grow quicker than maybe we can come up with new defenses. So the said, I would be curious to hear what you think, what AI risks are most relevant right now in the particular areas you're working on or in your communities. Maybe Nathan, we start with you. You said like you're working in the space, a part of the Genesis mission, AI for science, which might have different vulnerabilities or different issues than maybe more traditional computer vision and natural language processing community. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so a lot of the work that is going on in Genesis mission and actually across Department of Energy is focused on applying AI to science, and often in scientific applications. There's some nice ways to validate. You have experiments, you have numerical models, you have ways of saying, hey, this AI is suggesting something to me that is physically impossible. However, on the other hand, one of the reasons scientists are using AI, not just for things like accelerating computations, is they want to be surprised and delighted. They want to see the AI suggesting something more subtle, more complex, richer than what they would have used themselves. So there's also a tension from, okay, we have ways to understand if things are making sense, but scientists want answers that in some sense don't make sense, that they wouldn't come up with by themselves. And we're still not sure how to properly validate things when people are asking for that sort of surprising results and those surprising outputs that they wouldn't expect for themselves.
But maybe allow me a quick follow-up question. So sometimes a bit the question is like, what who wants to attack like AI for science? Assume like you have a scientist, they have a problem they study, they train the model from scratch. I mean, this may be a little bit limited. I think there are examples like maybe, okay, there's a danger about generating toxic materials or dangerous proteins, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit like, do you have an idea what the risk is? I mean, are we afraid of that foreign countries maybe try to attack these agentic frameworks for science? Or
the deeper we embed AI into all of our scientific processes, just like everyone else, the attack surface grows. So poisoning data sets that then allow more subtle errors downstream, whether it's how to control a very, very expensive instrument, how to validate, weather forecasts, all these things that lower your confidence in the AI and how it is being used have a cost. So an adversary can just raise the cost of science, slow down science, and generally transform this from a opportunity to a hazard. And so AI safety is not so much about making sure that we can trust. It's about protecting the entire scientific enterprise.
Okay, wonderful. Eddie, maybe you said like you did an intern last summer, and what do you think? What were the risks that were most relevant for you that you worked on?
Sure. I'll say AI Sweden, where I was at. A big part of what they do is a lot of this red teaming stuff. So they've done a lot of red teaming of federated learning systems. They most recently, the GPT-OSS models that came out last summer, they were a big part of red teaming those models. And so a big emphasis that they put on there, and in turn we were doing was that kind of red teaming work. Some of the results of that were looking into people who may be familiar with the term RAG. We're putting data into a large language model to kind of behind the scenes to give it kind of context to answer different questions. Something that we worked on in particular was what happens when people are able to inject adversarial documents into RAG. Documents that will be retrieved under a certain set of circumstances, documents that may contain adversarial instructions, false information, that sort of thing. So that was the main attack surface that we were focused on. Something that somewhat concerns me to this day, as far as people with their own bespoke RAG systems, or even as far as like frontier labs who may have their own systems. It's something that an attack surface that I would say is still very much blooming.
So basically that kind of data poisoning attacks slash vector attacks bits that you're concerned, or does it or basically also like prompt injection attacks in the LLM space? And
in this particular instance, we're talking more on the inference side. So this would be data poisoning as far as documents that might be posted online to be scraped that make their way into a RAG database.
Yeah. Okay, great. Maybe go Nada. What are risks that you think are most relevant in your communities?
I think it's a little hard to play favorites with risks since they can all cause harm. So I could speak more towards what's top of mind for me right now, which sometimes changes on a weekly basis in this field. I think the offensive cyber capabilities, we're seeing them grow a lot. And the offender-defender balance, it's concerning to see that it might be favoring the offender. And another thing is misalignment in the sense of the unpredictability of agents. I think as we're embedding these systems into really important decision-making structures, the unpredictability of how they perform their tasks can be pretty concerning. But I think there's an overarching risk, or maybe it's not necessarily a risk, but the difference, like the accountability gaps, where is the distance between who builds the system and who accepts these risks, and who is actually bearing the consequences of the failures, there's still a huge gap there. So I think that's something that also really needs our attention.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think for me, from kind of like more someone who do research in LLMs, I feel like the core risk, of course, it's like AI can fail itself, but like they make very confident mistakes. It gets like more persuasive. I think that is one risk. I think like at the beginning, it's easier to catch such mistakes or failure cases. It's getting harder. And also, like I feel like when model, we're adding more capacities to the model. That usually means we're also making them more exploitable and vulnerable. So the speed of we develop like more and more advanced model versus the speed we're looking at or actually checking whether such models are safe. I think there is still a gap there.
Yeah.
And also, like people start to deploy the AI models in more automated settings, like in multi-step systems, multi-turn chatbot. So I kind of feel like these errors can escalate in a way that could be unexpected. So those are all from like model perspective, are new risk associated with the rapid development of model itself. On the other side, I also feel like such models and the human over-reliance on the model itself, like there was a news a few days ago about people actually start to doubt a lot of times about whether the AI gave them is right or wrong, but they would still choose to believe it. I think that's also a risk. It's like when it gets more and more intelligent, we start to less, feel like trying to debate with it. We go with it, especially when it becomes very persuasive and confident. So I can feel like there is a human factor play in this as well. Potentially could be very risky to me.
Awesome. I would like to ask a follow-up question. What do you think? I mean, you described a little bit the risk, but what are the defenses? How are you trying to mitigate some of the risk? So I'm, as a researcher, I prefer to be on the attack side. I think it's way easier to come up with a new attack. But like defending these systems is pretty hard, right? Because you have to defend against all the unforeseeable attacks and vulnerabilities, whereas an attacker, I just have to find one threat vector and do it. And so kind of it would be, while you're answering it, like also fair. I mean, do you really trust the system, or do you think actually you make progress towards more secure, safe systems? Or do you, like, a fair answer is, well, we are just at the beginning and we need to do much more to actually make them safe and robust? So you're curious. I don't know who wants to go first. Leave it up to you. Just jump in.
I'm unmuted, so maybe I'll go first.
Perfect.
So if we think of more traditional machine learning, I think we've developed some really powerful machinery in both the attack space, but also in the explainability space, in the UQ space, so that if one focuses your attention on a specific model, you can very well characterize it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can solve the problems. However, now with agentic systems, I think one thing we're seeing is that it's not so much like these models are becoming more and more correct in ways that can be relied upon, but this is producing new emergent threats. So that it can be steered into still being correct, but in ways that are subtle. And so understanding these overall systems, explainability, digging deep into these embedding spaces still remains a tool that we need to keep refining.
Okay, super exciting. Yeah. Maybe Eddie, what was some of the defense? I mean, you talked about rack and these problems. So concrete, what was like a defense methodology that you try to employ to mitigate these risks?
Sure. Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things is, of course, data quality. As soon as you start allowing in garbage data or data that you don't trust, that's a threat vector there. So if you're able to confine your RAG systems, in my case, to data that you're confident in and that you know is secure, that's one thing. Another common trade-off with AI in general, and also applicable to my space, is that the greater the capability, the more security vulnerabilities there are. The more broad or general the AI system's capabilities are, the more broad and applicable the threat vectors could be. Which is a trade-off that you always, you see frontier labs playing with. You see really anybody who's using these systems toying with. So of course you could tune a knob by saying, okay, we want a more secure AI system, by just saying, okay, we're going to have a weaker AI system, and that's something that you can do. But really, it ends up being, at least in my experience, it ends up being a lot of playing catch up, a lot of reactive work rather than proactive. And you are able to patch certain vulnerabilities as they come, but as it stands, I think the industry is more postured towards a reactive sort of capability.
Yeah, you make an interesting point, and maybe we can talk a bit more about this a little bit later, that you said, okay, there's like basically safety and performance is at odds with each other, right? I mean, typically you want a model that performs very well, but if you kind of come up with safety layers and so on, then you reduce a bit the performance. I guess if you would avoid that the model is producing any output, then you have a super safe system, but it's not very useful. It doesn't perform, right? So you have to find this balance. But yeah, I think that's a fair point. A quick other question. I mean, you mentioned quality of data, right? I think it's such a hard problem. I mean, how do you ensure good quality of data? Because I think it's typically it's a constraint, or you have a budget on how much time you can spend to look at the data. Even if you were to use an LLM to screen them, it costs probably a lot, depending if you have massive amount of data. So do maybe very short answer. How did you ensure the quality? Did you kind of just create some in-house and they were trusted, or what was your approach?
We actually didn't. We were on the red teaming side, so we weren't really doing any of the data quality insurance. But yeah, it would end up probably being more on the just sources, right? Just making sure you're acquiring data from trusted sources.
Yeah, great. Don't know, Nada, Yui, what are your strategies to defend against some of the risk you mentioned, or at least what are possibilities?
Yeah, so then I first echo what you said. I mostly work on attacks as well. I had collaborators. I mostly do research on NLP and start to collaborate with cybersecurity expert. I think this is what they told me, is attacks are exciting and defense is boring, because they view defense as more like, patching the attacks. People have fun, which is more exciting. So the attackers are trying to attack systems from different ways. So I think it's kind of like normal, most of us are adversarial defenses rather than attacks rather than defense. Yeah. But my view is attacks are adaptive. We're looking for scanning for different vulnerabilities. The defenses currently are more reactive, right? We find no threats and we patch it. Is this problematic? I feel like yes. I can feel like the philosophy should be attacks only need one opening, but for us who want to defend the model, we really need reliable protections across many different settings. And this is also why I think mechanistic interpretability or understanding of how knowledge is flowing inside of the model matters, because we can patch the symptoms, but it's kind of like a mouse chasing the cat chasing mouse game, right? Then they find a new kind of vulnerabilities and we keep patching, and then we will encounter the problem, as you mentioned, the trade-off between the safety versus the intelligence of the model. We can make, in general, when we make models safer on certain things, we lose a little bit a helpfulness or intelligence of the model. So it kind of I feel hopefully we have something as you mentioned, refusal vectors inside of the model. We can have more precise controls, so that we can come up with better defenses that could defend a wide range of attacks. So that's kind of one thing. one way we can do. I think another kind of line, a lot of like other research was talking about it's the access or the threat model. If like the attackers can only access the input output, perhaps we don't really need to go inside of the model to do defense. We just need some guardrails. So I think both line of research are very valuable, and I think we should try to push forward both of them. But I also think it's definitely some gaps there. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Nana, do you have a perspective?
Yeah, I think I can speak more to governance type mitigation. I think doing more due diligence around understanding risks and assessing whether or not you even have the resources to implement mitigations, or if the mitigations exist yet, before deploying these systems into your workflows or your spaces. And once they're deployed, prioritizing oversight and information gathering to be able to catch these risks or incidents. So from a governance perspective, I think it's just very important to have these practices in place where you understand these risks, understands whether or not the mitigations exist, and then make a calculated decision on whether or not you want to expose yourself to these vulnerabilities.
So maybe there was a question from the audience, which I think you're the perfect person maybe to answer this, start to discuss. So the question is like, we're starting to see laws and regulations starting to require safe AI models, right? So it's a very, very strong ask. So I'm thinking specifically in the generative AI area where they are trying to prevent things like deep fakes. But then there's a vibrant community working to taking out guardrails, the attack community, I guess. You find like, I think, models on Hugging Face that have removed safety alignments, etc. So what are your take on how laws and regulations are going to positively or negatively affect AI models and safety? And maybe I add to it, it's like, it's not very, very concrete objective what safe AI means and some of these things. So how from your side, I mean, how it can come up with useful laws and regulations?
Yeah, I think that having laws and regulations is going to be really important for having the accountability and liability structures. But at the same time, I think there's a whole ecosystem of AI actors that need to play their part in order to truly have safe and secure AI systems. I think that the laws and regulations being put in place will positively impact us towards that direction, but there still needs to be a full ecosystem of AI actors and AI stakeholders working towards this. I'm not super familiar with the community working to take down the guardrails, but my hope is that more state level legislation such as SB 53 and the RAISE Act, states are going to continue to work together, and we're going to have more laws and more accountability and liability structures in place.
Interesting. I don't know if anyone wants to follow up. So, I mean, I'm part of the community who takes down guardrails just from a research point of view, right? I mean, to understand, are these guardrails durable or not? I think you're kind of doing similar things, right? So, how would that fit? I mean, we have to do this to understand the behavior, to understand durability. But of course, this creates risk, I guess. What is your perspective?
Yeah, so this was a learning process for me. I think Ben, we have talked about this a lot. I was always interested in at beginning white box attacks, right? Like I want to access the model's weights and then see there are things we can see from that. I think perhaps the view was changed a bit when I was talking to security expert first. They mentioned like black box ones are more kind of like a generalizable in daily uses. And then another view change was from talking to a NLP professor who went on basically like meeting in Washington, and he was telling me the government policymakers want the models to be closed sourced. So they don't want to open source the model, because when you open the weights, it posts more threats. So I kind of feel like, yeah, it seems to me there is some differences between how researchers want to proceed the attack and defenses versus what government think what is safe to release to people. I definitely see kind of like I do think the two community need to talk to each other. So attackers were having fun, like well, I wouldn't say we're having fun, but we're trying our best to defend against any kind of like threats we think it could coming off. But that's a lot of times require us to have access of more things. So I do think currently there is a little bit like gray zone here. Hopefully, like with the both communities align with each other, I think that it's going somewhere.
Yeah, Nathan, I would be also interested in your perspective, because I think regulations for requiring safe AIs in critical science task processes I could think about. I mean, fusion or nuclear energy problems is important to ensure. But I think. What's your point? I mean, have you thought about, can it be I mean, it's probably very hard coming up with useful regulations, and there's such a big gap between maybe people who traditionally work on law and AI researchers, and how do you bridge this?
Yeah, I think if one comes at the perspective of modern AI is matrix multiplication. You realize, oh, it's very difficult to regulate matrix multiplication. However, it is much easier to think about, as you pointed out, the systems that they're going into. Are the systems, can you certify that they're behaving the way we expect? And with things like nuclear power, or I mean, a whole slew of existing regulatory frameworks, people have experience saying, okay, we don't have to worry necessarily about every microscopic component of this system, although certainly there are things that one does worry about. But we have to have an understanding of what it means for the system to operate safely. So are you building in components that are robust? Are you building in things? And this is unfortunately application specific.
Yeah.
But that level of building into frameworks and applications that we already understand allows us to focus our attention on what does it mean to use AI to control a nuclear power plant. How is that different than the current algorithms that are being used? What if an AI is controlling a robot inside of a nuclear power plant?
Yeah.
I think those allow us to think more clearly about what are the tools and the risks and the mitigations and the evaluation frameworks that need to go into that particular component.
That's a fantastic answer, and maybe that leads me to my next question a little bit. So I was curious, like, if you all think if frontier labs are doing enough to make AI systems safe and secure. And maybe I want to give it a little bit a spin based on your answer. Is do you think they are just responsible for making it secure and safe, and we should hold them accountable, or is it like actually more on us who use these models in certain systems or applications, and the work needs to be done to secure it for a specific application? Do you have a take, Nathan? You want to?
Yeah. So actually, I think the answer most of us would say was they're not doing enough.
Yeah.
I think one of the big gaps is they're not providing the necessary tools and access for us to really understand what these models are doing. There's so much proprietary black magic under the hood these days. We're totally reliant on white papers that come out from these labs of, oh, we tried it this way with our secret sauce, and this is what we got. We don't have the way we have with many other tools, the ability to identify the weaknesses when we see a white paper that says, oh, this, Claude Mythos is 15% better at rejecting harmful prompts. I know a lot of us here are like, well, hold my beer.
Yeah.
I want to be able to not just understand those statistics. I want to dig in and understand why is it better or worse at these particular areas. And we need access to the guts, and we need access to those explainability tools that they have internally.
Well, fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add on what Nathan said. It was also, I think we're making progress for sure, but not enough relevant to the pace of the development and how fast we're deploying the model and the capability growth. Though, like in the meanwhile, I want to really second what Nathan said. It's I think part of the problem is a lot of current safety work we're using are very remain on benchmarks, and the benchmarks we're developing was very slow and narrow and focused. They're useful, but I feel like they're creating this false sense of coverage when I see on the news how people was able to like easily bypass this safety alignment, like with just like really simple tactics. I was like, are we really going forward together as a research community on the right thing or the right way if people who doesn't have much technical background can crack our model so easily? So this is like one thing I feel like is still, I just want to second Nathan, was like when we see, we're improving the ASR rate, we're like making the model has better adversarial robustness, like how real those numbers are. I also feel like the incentives are a bit imbalanced from what maybe this is something I think I would ask Nada to say more, but I feel like from some of industry friends was telling me it's kind of like from the incentives perspective, like labs in like a commercial or like industry, it's a bit different. They want to like definitely safety alignments, like safety guardrails, but minimally to bypass the law requirement rather than they're actively trying to make models safer. I think this go back to what Ben you said, the trade-off, right? Whenever a model is safer, it will lose certain capacities. It will refuse to answer a lot of answers, and user might not be happy with it. So how do we navigate through that? I think there are definitely good and real efforts there. For me, there is definitely also gaps there, for sure.
Yeah, I can definitely build on that a little bit. I think I agree that the model developers or the labs are not doing enough. The capacity of, or the pace of growth of the model capabilities are definitely much quicker than the governance structures, and the incentives are not very straightforward. A lot of the times when model developers are transparent, it's not met with I guess applause. It's met with a little bit of backlash. So I think that those incentive structures being a little bit more straightforward would be very helpful. And yeah, I think that having some external accountability with real teeth and not just voluntary commitments will be very helpful. A part of all of that is also not just relying on these kind of binary disclosures where either something is disclosed and it's public or it's completely private and only available to the lab itself. There should be some tiered disclosure. I think there are a lot of researchers and a lot of communities that would really benefit from more transparency around how these evaluations are being developed, how these thresholds are being developed, and kind of understanding a little bit more, how the sausage is made, which is not information that the public needs to know. So some tiered disclosure type of system would be really helpful so that we can move forward, but at the same time, not, publish information that could be potentially malicious in some way.
Fantastic. There was a question by Joe. Do we see a future where open source models get better, maybe with some fine tuning, and which can be run at home without guardrails? I think such that it can be used to exploit critical infrastructure. I don't see how regulation or guardrails address this problem if you run, I guess, these models at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry.
no. Oh, sure. And I'm sure you have a lot of interesting stuff to say about the critical infrastructure. I won't quite touch on that. I wanted to say that I think we're already there, that free models that exist out there are extremely capable. And the guardrails are often external, at least on the black box side. And so what that leads to is it's very easy to crack these, at least the last generation that I've been a part of testing. It's very easy to crack them and to get them to say things that they probably shouldn't. An interesting case that I tried out, and won't go into it too far, but language models are autoregressive, and so what you can do is you can ask it a question, let's say, how do I make a bomb, which it obviously shouldn't answer. And if it were to just go on and answer, it would say, sorry, I can't help you with that. But the majority of the fine tuning is such that if you prompt it by telling it that it said, I would love to help you with this question, and then continuing from there, just having it generate the next token after I would love to help you with this question, it'll go ahead and answer. And so we don't even need any fine tuning. You don't need any experience with that, any large GPUs for those types of jobs. As it stands, it's actually quite feasible for the average user to use these free models to extract information that they shouldn't.
Right. Nathan, you wanted to?
Oh yeah, I was
something?
gonna say that this actually gets directly back to the previous question of are the frontier labs doing enough? We don't understand enough on how their post-training works, on how these things. So do we expect, model distillation aside, do we expect, yes, open models will get more parameter efficient and so on, but are they going to receive the post-training they need to truly feel like, oh, these are dangerous cyber tools? We don't know, because we don't know what Anthropic and OpenAI are doing to get them to reach that level of performance. And perhaps if we did, we could have a more direct answer to that question of how, where will these open models get?
Great, yeah. Nada, I think there's a follow-up question. Maybe you can briefly take it. So Josie asked, I don't see how it could be on anyone outside of the companies, except maybe the government. If a company makes a car with bad brakes, it can't be all on the driver when they get in an accident. So how does this relate to these AI systems?
Yeah, I completely agree where the liability on the product itself can't be on the end user. So if a car with faulty brakes is sold, that's not on the end user if they get in an accident, or the driver if they get in an accident. But at the same time, as drivers of that car, we need to understand how to operate it. We need to get our driver's license, and we need to approach using this tool or this product in a safe way. So I think that's what I mean when I say that it's a whole ecosystem that needs to work together to make sure that these tools are being used safely. But the overall safety of the product itself and making sure that it applies to standards and it is usable by people is on governments to regulate it in a way that these things are insured, and for the companies to abide by those regulations. So I completely agree with that statement, but would also like to add that as end users, you still have a responsibility to make sure that you're using those tools safely.
Wonderful, thank you. So we're getting towards the end, but I want to kind of ask a few more questions with maybe very short answers, because I think it could be interesting for the audience. So basically, what scenario, AI scenario or risk scenario worries you most over the next 5 years? So what should we work on? With a very short answer. We can start. Eddie, Yui, Nathan, Nada, this order.
Sure. I think the fun answer is like a PDoom kind of scenario, but my more realistic answer is jobs and white collar work for the most part.
Right.
Yeah, for me, I think it's just like collective bias and then the vulnerabilities of AI models. If it get like really deployed in all different infrastructures, it's kind of like a normal operation 99% of the time. But with that 1%, they're all kind of like collective feeling, having failures together. I think that worries me the most. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm very worried about the alignment problem, particularly now as AI are getting more and more effective. I think you could actually map it closer to the insider threat issue, where we're going to be giving these things more and more access, and they'll be more and more effective at end running the things that we don't want them to be doing, even if they think that they're being helpful and not being nefarious. So I'm very worried about AI alignment.
That's great. Fantastic. Sorry, I jump in because there was another question a bit related to this. When agents start talking to each other, and they use a communication that we can't directly assess, so they move away from using natural language to communicate, right? So we don't even understand what they communicate about, which introduces risk. I think it goes a little bit in towards the alignment problem as well. And do you have an idea how we can assess this, or do you just say, okay, this is future research?
I do. There's some checks and balances we have right now, but I think we've all seen these agents have very surprising emergent behavior, and it's not sustainable just to make a whole giant growing decision tree of ways to validate, are things working properly?
Perfect. Okay, great. Nada, what do you worry most about?
I think the thing I think about the most is just the normalization of opacity in the systems. The capabilities are going to keep growing and getting more complicated, and even the model developers might not even understand why things are happening.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. This was wonderful. There were some more questions we didn't get to, but we're at the end of the panel, and the poster session is starting now. I would like to thank you so much for this very exciting discussion and the insights you provided. And I hope we can do this panel again in another venue and talk more. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.